Welcome. Today we're joined by Sean Jordan, founder of Strata Press. I'm actually an advisory board member of Strata Press, as is Jason Kurtz, who we had on last week talking about retention in strata management. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on board with the chat. I'm
Yeah.
usually better at, I think, live events in front of an audience, but this works fine. You just never know who's out there. It's kind of flying blind.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's kind of
We're
fun.
here to talk about how to simplify Strata Council's workload, and you're an expert at that. Tell us a bit more about your background before we get into the details.
Okay, well, what led me to Strata Press was I have a background in internet technologies, something I've been doing for over 25 years. I've produced hundreds of online projects for companies around the world. And this was just something I did for our stratas. I was a council member, a strata president for 3 different stratas over a 15-year period. And every one of those stratas, I provided them a website of some kind to access documents. So the strata owners could access documents and communicate with the council, and in some cases, the property management company. So that background, online technologies, working with stratas. I did actually do my property management licensing course 25 years ago. I never actually worked as a licensed property manager. I just did that. So I knew what I was doing for some property investors on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And yeah, so that's how StrataPress was born. When I came back from Vegas, I was still council president for a property in Victoria. I was in Vegas for 2 years and we did everything online. And it worked great. Back then, we did conference calls on the phone instead of Zoom. But when I got back to Canada, I thought it would actually make a tidy little business because the portals I provided for our stratas were very popular and widely used for a couple of years before I dove into StrataPress. So with the help of a genius programmer I found on Vancouver Island, we launched this initially about 2015, but we restructured it and relaunched it in 2017, and it's evolved constantly since that time. So right now,
nothing better than lived experience to help you determine how to build tools that will help. And obviously, having served on several strata councils yourself, and I know your technical co-founder Paul has done the same, sets you up really nicely.
Yeah, helps your lead programmer is also president of his strata council, so that's helpful. And our business did evolve. We started working more with property management companies to solve a problem they had in processing document requests from realtors, lawyers, and notaries. So as we grew that business, we pulled the portal that we created out of the closet, so to speak, and started letting property management companies introduce that to their strata corporations. And since then, it's grown to over 35,000 strata owners, registered owners, and probably about 7,500 registered realtors and lawyers. So that's our primary business, selling strata documents, but the strata owners portal works very well with that for document distribution and communication. So widely used.
It all ties in.
Yeah. We send about 250,000 emails, notifications out per month, and that's growing. So a lot of centralized communication is what we're going for. So streamlining council operations, as a council member, I found this was very important. As you get more experience, not only working on a council, but being exposed to how these different strata councils work through building StrataPress over the last 10 years, you just start to see where things can be more efficient. These councils are made up of volunteers with limited time and resources, and the buildings themselves and bylaws become more complex. Councils need tools and systems to reduce friction. So having some efficiency will help, with missed deadlines, missed maintenance, poor communication. Those things all lead to owner frustration and increased cost. And, inefficient operations can just damage the trust. And, you can avoid disputes if you're more organized, I suppose. I never had a problem with any of the stratas I was on. Everything seemed to run really great. I thought they all ran great. But the thing is, people had access to information anytime they needed, and they got answers, and we were very transparent on the platform. So leverage these, digital tools that are online to save time. create repeatable structures, standard agendas, templates, calendar, maintenance, the tasks, things like that. And, the bottom line is councils, I just tweeted this yesterday, councils should be focused on oversight and not administration. So we can automate a lot of the routine tasks. You can automate a lot of the routine tasks like owner communication, scheduling, financial reporting, those type of things. And that communication with owners really strengthens, the trust and keeps things running very efficiently. So
communication is key in all multifamily
communication and a little bit of planning. Plan the year in advance. There's not a lot of events that you have to look out for as a council, but you can plan all those things. The AGM, when it's going to be scheduled, your budgets, when your renewals on your insurance are going to take place. You can schedule those things into a calendar just to help remind you of what needs to be done next. I've had a lot of council members come to me and say, I don't have the need to learn all this. I have the need for someone to tell me what to do. So that's the attitude, is like, they don't want to learn the Strata Property Act. They don't want to figure out how to manage budgets. I mean, we're essentially putting volunteers in charge of a multi-million-dollar corporation.
Yes.
And with little skills. If you're lucky, you got an accountant in there doing your books if you're self-managed, or if you're on the council reviewing information from the property manager so you can make decisions. So yeah,
this is a recurring theme that we talk about. And I guess it kind of starts with document management.
Yeah. So centralized, that's the problem. Scattered documents. Council members store documents in personal emails, desktops, paper folders. This creates confusion, slows down response. You risk losing critical records. And then you got the turnover at council can make this worse, because you got new members looking for old information that somebody else had who may have moved and may not even have any association with the property. So centralizing where your documents are stored and managed is essential. If you can get a system that's searchable, you can search the archives, digital systems that allow you to do keyword searches or dates or document types. Those are very helpful. Reducing the risk of duplication or contradiction when you got similar, same name document, but two different versions. So having it all centralized in one spot can avoid those type of things. And like I mentioned, council transitions, new council members can be granted instant access to a full historical record. And there's no need for that physical handoff of, where's the binder?
That's a really good point. So this allows that continuity as board members change.
Yeah. And that's super important, because board members will change and people are very hesitant to get on board with the council, mostly because there's frustration. There's no information to work with. So if you're giving access to a Strata owner or a council member, they can find the information. It's all archived, it's all organized. And in some cases, some systems allow you to search through the documents. And things like AI will make this even easier, where you can ask for specific information from certain documents, like your AGM minutes from 2 years ago. You might want to inquire something about that, without having to open up, some of these documents are 30 pages. Same with bylaws, things like that. So centralized document management, that's a very essential step. Digital voting is, it's starting to appear more often. Obviously, since the pandemic and stuff, this is becoming more acceptable. Many decisions, especially minor ones, are delayed unnecessarily, waiting for a council meeting. So these delays can slow down repairs and communication and just general responsiveness. So digital voting enables council members to review a vote on issues when their time allows for it. If you put a expiry date on the voting time, the next Friday, they can vote on issues once they've reviewed the information. And so there's no need to coordinate everybody's availability for a quick decision and a vote in real time. You can send out a poll or do some digital voting as well. So some systems allow for that. So some of the issues you might want to vote on, approving a quote that's under a set spending limit, selecting a preferred contractor from a pre-vetted list of options,
Right.
Approving meeting minutes, those type of things.
And then those decisions can get ratified at the next council meeting.
Yeah. The councils should agree on what type of decisions can be made digitally. So routine maintenance, document approval, those type of things. And then you don't have to wait until that, because even some stratas, our strata had a meeting every 3 months because we were just efficient. Every month there wasn't enough things to talk about that needed immediate, action. So, if you have to wait 3 months to get a decision on something, that could be frustrating for strata owners.
I was talking to somebody recently who kind of has the bare minimal management contract, which they kind of describe as a 4+1, meaning that you get your 4 council meetings and then your 1 major AGM.
Yeah.
So, being able to have additional capabilities to make decisions between those, I think is very important for urgent matters.
Yeah. Or even just to avoid delay, time sensitive issues like choosing a landscaping, rock bed or bark mulch, so they can make those decisions quickly without everybody getting upset and it's pre-approved on a budget. It just, let's make some decisions.
That's interesting. It makes me think about polling the owners at large as well, and being able to get their input on something as critical as
exactly
the bark mulch decision, But
that's if you got a flexible platform that can just poll council members or poll all strata owners, and there's polling software out there. There's some systems have polling built right in as well. So yeah, the polling, it also archives, those responses. Digital votes can be recorded for the next set of minutes. Pardon me.
Fantastic. No, that's a great tool, and obviously that makes a lot of sense. As we're talking about streamlining, nothing streamlines more than having some standardized templates. Tell us a bit more about what your thoughts are in that area.
Yeah, so unstructured, loosely run meetings can go off topic very quickly or run over time. So if you have some templates, your important items won't be forgotten. Decisions can be documented. So everyone knows to expect. If you create templates for agenda items, timelines, required decisions, this will reduce anxiety for both council members and any attending owners. And since, it helps stay focused on time, so a time block agenda can prevent meetings from being dominated by a single issue as well. So encourages prioritization of critical topics first, and ensures key issues aren't missed. And this will also improve your meeting minutes quality. Standard agenda provides a natural outline for minute taking, making it easier to record and follow up on decisions. So that's where I'm at on that.
I know a lot of owners are nervous if they are contemplating joining council, that they just don't have the familiarity. They've never been on one before. They don't know how to run one of these sessions. Having some of this standardized, I think, will help.
That's right. It encourages preparedness and accountability. So council members will know ahead of time what will be discussed, so they come prepared. And, responsibility for agenda items can be assigned in advance as well. So I think that's probably a big, hesitation for people is not coming into something prepared. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, what's going on?
Absolutely.
But if you use a template, you're going through a list of items, a call to order, approval of the previous minutes, a financial update, maintenance repair issues, those type of things, new business, and so on. So there's a list step by step. So it doesn't have to be a daunting task, So
speaking of daunting tasks, tracking maintenance requests, staying on top of the routine, proactive, and seasonal maintenance, these sorts of things are very consuming for Strata Council members.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about how that's done and what can be done to ease that process for Strata Council members?
Yeah, council members will volunteer their time, and they'll end up being buried in paperwork and emails and follow-ups, and they'll get frustrated quickly. So, delegation of routine tasks is, delegating the workload amongst the volunteers. So, each council member has a role. Sometimes it's just, they're the treasurer, they have something specific, or there'll be a member at large. So council's role is to make decisions and provide oversight, and not to track every light bulb replacement or email for an owner. So delegating also allows council to focus on bigger picture issues. So
exactly. And
yeah,
we talk a lot about correspondence. It's been a huge issue for the strata management industry. At a self-managed level, those issues are just downloaded further onto the volunteers. Again, having ways to streamline the management of tasks, the communication, and the follow-up is routine. And I know that you've put a ton of thought into that. Tell us a bit more about what your approach is to creating these clear communication channels.
Well, I think the most important thing about communication is transparency. That's the one thing about the messaging that's going back and forth. The other thing about communication channels, when you have a new council that comes together, I used to get council members come up and say, well, I've got a specific email for my council duties, because they didn't want to mix it in with their personal email. And I could understand that. But using a centralized system that doesn't disclose your personal email could help alleviate that, because the number one problem was nobody was checking their council email. So it was like everything was just going off into ether on these made up emails to keep it separated, but nobody was getting the messages and getting the information.
And honestly, a real issue is when you put your personal email into meeting minutes, that becomes part of the corporate records. That's now contact information for the strata. And I know that this is something that we've talked about before. You really do want to make sure that what you're putting into the corporate records is meant for corporate communication, and having a way to redirect that from being a personal email or from being something that is set up specifically for strata but that gets overlooked is a system that centralizes that. And so how does it work then? If I'm an owner in a community and I've got a StrataPress platform, how do those communications get managed?
So we've got 4 different types of communication channels that are specific for whatever the purpose is. First one is just sending out updates, which goes from the strata council or the management to all the owners. There's discussions that are created by council members that include all the other council members by default, but they can add specific owners into a discussion. Right. And that could be just volunteering some work in the landscaping and providing details to those volunteers. We have requests that come from the strata owner to the management and council. And then we have notices that can go out from the management and council to specific owners, usually at one time. Here's some information you requested, or some information that's specific to you. So those are the channels we have. It's all transparent. Nothing gets deleted. It's like sending out an email. But the beauty is it's all archived as well. So updates that go out provide a tracking ability for when minutes of meetings were sent or financials. And in ours, we take it one step further, is we can actually look at the email list of the strata owners and see which emails got delivered, which ones were opened, which ones got bounced, so that we know, this person's email is continually bouncing.
Actually been received.
Yeah, exactly. And then if it's consistently being bounced, then somebody can follow up with a phone call to that person to get the proper information. So just as an example, proper communication, onboarding a company with say 4,000 owners, we did this before. We onboarded them all, sent them a welcome message, and we had over 400 emails bounced. And the property management company wasn't even aware that those emails weren't being delivered, because most companies don't, and most councils don't have any way of knowing.
Right.
Did that get
10%.
delivered?
That's amazing.
Yeah, 10%. And it wasn't, through neglect or anything. It was just those emails that were collected maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, when the owner moved in. They change, and
maybe
they didn't
more.
have any way.
Some people do live in their communities for many years, and we've all been through numerous email changes.
Yeah, and they don't think They don't think to update that stuff.
That's
so, you got to provide a way for someone to know how to contact the council directly, without it being in a portal, because they may have a question about how to even log in, how to even register for this system they've provided. So there's got to be that type of thing, and that could be in the meeting minutes. We consistently always put contact information in the meeting minutes, an email address that the owners could contact if they had any questions. Otherwise, everything was distributed through the platform we built, which was the predecessor to the current Strata Owners Portal.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So very
talk to me about this prioritization of tasks.
Okay. Forgotten, overlooked tasks. Council members juggling many responsibilities, repairs, finances, bylaws, communication, things like that. Without a structured system, action items just slip through the cracks between meetings.
Yeah.
So having a tracking tool, a central shared tasks list helps ensure accountability. This will work for a lot of people. Some people it doesn't. Some people just love making lists, and it becomes a list of things to do that never get done. So there's a balance there with that. You gotta prioritize urgent tasks, roof leaks,
of course,
lower priority items, your website update or whatever it might be. So, these things also help plan budgets, based on seasonality
True.
and capacity. So task management tools are very helpful. They'll help with decisions made during meetings. Sometimes they require a follow-up, but transparency tools out there like Trello. I think Google Sheets, they have shareable task lists for smaller councils. So you want to track maintenance and repair items, owner communication and complaints, insurance compliance renewals, things like that, action items and follow-ups from previous meetings, and even projected timelines. So these are important tools as well, just as long as they don't get out of hand with endless lists of things that never get done.
Exactly. And I mean, that kind of comes back to, the way that they task manage and how they ensure that the items have been dealt with and not just neglected. You've got your routine maintenance. You've got these key council activities as well. You've talked about the need to prep your budget, to do those reviews, to get that insurance in place.
Even that turnover, again, outgoing council members can leave a list of open pending tasks that don't get forgotten because we know those issues haven't yet been, addressed. So that helps with transition to new councils as well.
True. Very true.
Mm-hmm.
And defining the role of council members and what's expected of them. I think this is a problem, whether you're on a very small strata or a large managed one.
Yeah.
Talk to us about your experience there.
I think roles are very important. It does give some responsibility, spreads that responsibility amongst the volunteers, especially with the treasury, the treasurer's responsibility. Usually had somebody who's going to take care of all the accounting. And I'm always picturing this, as a self-managed strategist. You're not going to have these issues necessarily working with professional management, but as a council member on a self-managed strata, these are important to have roles. And I guess they are with the professionally managed too, because then you know who you're going to communicate with.
It is those channels of communication that matter, right? I've actually heard from property managers that they really don't like correspondence that happens direct with certain strata council members that are outside the official channels, because then they can't perform their duties effectively if they're not aware of someone making a bylaw complaint or dealing with those sorts of issues.
Right. So without clear rules, things may be duplicated or not done at all. It eliminates tension where there's expectations aren't met, where one person was expected to do much more than they're capable of doing or have time to do. So clarity matters for that. And what we're talking about, president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, everybody else is a member at large.
With over 30,000 strata corporations in British Columbia alone, and a minimum of 3 strata council members on each, you can see how quite quickly you get to that 125,000, 150,000 plus individuals And they do move and they do turn over. And, this opportunity for things to fall between the cracks or create efficiencies is very real.
Yeah. And that leads to this point, onboarding. Transition packages for new council members makes it really easy for new council members to get up to speed and understand what their expectations are. So when a council member leaves, valuable contacts, processes, decisions often leave with them, and new members are left to figure it out, leading to efficiencies and delays or repeated mistakes. So having a structured handoff ensures council members can hit the ground running and reduces that learning curve, minimizes disruption on ongoing projects. Because you never know when your AGM, I guess when it's coming up, but projects scheduled around that, and suddenly you've lost 3 of your council members to new members, new volunteers. So you got to have a transition package, an onboarding package that can be created to make sure that there's a manageable handover. And if you're using a platform like StrataPress, that information's all recorded. It's all in sequence. It's all chronological order. All the information centralized, that type of thing. So
I recall when I first was introduced to you that what stood out to me was that you were able to have that continuity, and that it didn't matter whether you were self-managed moving between council members, if you were managed moving between property management firms, or taking the jump between those 2 different tiers. Whatever the case was, the continuity of information, the continuity of communication was retained. And I think that that's hugely important. And it allows you to use that institutional knowledge that is owned by and sticks with the Strata Corporation to make more informed decisions. So that kind of leads on to your last topic or slide.
Yeah, if I could just on that last bit, just about the ongoing onboarding. When I see councils, when I do talk to them, I do ask a lot of questions when we're doing a Q&A demo of StrataPress, for instance, and I'll ask them, what kind of information do you wish you had when you first joined your council? And, that provides a lot of feedback. Nobody gets asked that question like, oh, well, I mean, if you were going to give me information, this is what I would have preferred, I would have appreciated. So it gets them up to speed. So I think the onboarding package and transition package to new council members is, even if it's an updated page on a website, or take responsibility once a year, review that onboarding package so that new volunteers can be up to speed and things don't get, dismissed or lost.
And there you have it. The number 1 request.
That's right. Using data to inform decisions. So, without access to reliable data, councils will often make decisions based on opinions, assumptions, past habits. So this can lead to inconsistent outcomes and a lot of mistakes. So good data removes guesswork, enables faster, more confident decisions, and kind of moves the council from reactive mindset to proactive planning approach, which I think you always want to be, is not reacting to a situation, but proactively being ahead of it. So types of information that you can track: financial trends, your budget versus actuals, rising costs, overdue strata fees, maintenance history, frequency of repairs, vendor performance, failure points. You've got owner feedback, complaints, patterns and concerns, noise, parking, bylaw violations.
Yeah,
insurance claims. Yeah, lots about parking. Insurance claims should be tracked. That I think those are very important, especially if you have repeating problems, water damage. If you don't track this stuff, you might not see there's an underlying problem or risk of it happening again. And new council members come on board and are unaware of these previous events. So, and then depreciation report, reviewing that. Lots of good data in there. What's been addressed? What's still pending? So,
I attended a webinar yesterday with Winford, and what was really interesting about that was how the mindset of proactive versus reactive makes such a huge difference. So again, having this informed decision process, thanks to better data being in place, is huge.
it's much more helpful to be proactive than reactive. It's less stressful as well. So, those planning insurance and things like that. So definitely.
Sean, we could talk about this stuff all day because we love it and we live it. But we do try to keep these things short. If you were to sort of summarize your experience as a Strata Council member, and given what you've learned at Strata Press over the last decade, what would be the top 3 things that you want Strata Council members to know and to do to streamline their operations?
Okay, well, like I said, the number one thing for us was transparency. So always maintain transparency. This reduces friction and reduces conflict. For me, I advise council members to, especially when I was on a council, to stick with the mandate of the Strata Council, which is to maintain common property for the benefit of all the Strata owners.
Right.
That's really the priority. That's what you're looking at, is keep the property value there, maintain common property, and avoid the personal conflicts and trying to become a mediator. There's mediation available for that, but the Strata Property Act also provides great guidelines about what you should be doing as a council member or as a Strata corporation, and just stick to those parameters, and not try to get involved in disputes between owners, and just outline the priorities of the Strata Council very clearly to the rest of the owners. Maybe when you're making your pitch to be on council, you can then say, this is what I would like to focus our efforts on to save money or to improve the property and to attract volunteers, because one of those things, those personal interactions and disputes, are what really turn people off from working on a council. So transparency, stick to making decisions for the benefit of all the owners on common property and expenses and things like that. And lastly, I would say it does take an effort. It's not going to happen automatically, but we can reduce the amount of effort it requires. If my vision is over the next few years is to really integrate an AI component that can not only walk a council member through the tasks they have to do as a group, as a collective and individuals, but also allows them to find information quickly and easily and back up that information with the actual documentation. So if you're asking for what's the pet bylaws in my Strata, it'll not only give you the answer, but it'll point to the document that outlines your pet bylaws as written in the bylaws. So those type of things. I hope that helps. I think owners should be very interested in being on council. I was always on council because I was protecting my investment. It's the largest investment probably any individual is going to make, is buying their condo or Strata property, whatever it is, Bearland Strata. You want to protect the interests, and so you should be involved in decision making of maintaining that common property and keeping everything running smoothly. If you're on a Bearland Strata, for instance, probably have to deal with lift stations for your sewer or water, clearing the roads of snow in the winter. So it takes a bit of effort, but we can automate a lot of this stuff and we can push proactive tasks to do. And I think it just makes Strata management a way easier to do. It's far easier.
Got me smiling because I'm hugely passionate about financial literacy. That's what got me into this in the first place. And I do think everyone that lives in one of these communities should care. We have time for just 1 or 2 questions. One that came in, Sean, was, do you have a way to track bylaw violation notices?
Yes, we do. We just set up a system that allows you to send out. Initially, you'll communicate the bylaw violation, but when it comes to issuing a fine, we have a system, a feature that does that. Sends the information in a formal letter to the recipient. It provides them a communication channel about that issue, and it sends reminders when expiry dates have come up, and so they can be addressed. And that's all tracked separately. I know I listed the other communication options, but bylaw violations you can send and track separately, and those are all archived as well.
Fantastic. And just one more, the last one. Have you got accounting capabilities? We use QuickBooks and it's not ideal for our Strata.
We are working on a component for accounting. Not sure if that's the right word for it. it's more bookkeeping for a single self-managed strata. You're going to have your budget and you're going to track your expenses. And in some cases, especially if you work with StrataPress, you'll track your revenue. And since all those tasks take place through our system, our one platform, we can create an accounting bookkeeping system that can be basically help you file your corporate taxes at the end of the year, give you a real-time glimpse at what your budget is, what you spent, those type of things. So yeah, so yeah, that is something we're working on right now, and we're actually incorporating first part of our AI into that, not to do the accounting part, but to guide you through what is required when doing accounting for a self-managed strata.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Sean, thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we're going to have Ryan Grant talking about the power of participation in strata communities.
Oh, great.
That'll be a great session. Yeah. And we'll have you back on in the fall to tell us a bit more about some of the other
new
factors.
Features. Yeah, maybe I can. I can talk more about some of the technology behind what we're doing now, document management and distribution, things like that. Appreciate
thanks everyone for joining us. There's a website link there on your screen. Go to stratapress.com, learn a bit more about how your Strata workload could be simplified. Thanks, Sean. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.